At the start of the movie, a young woman speeds down a dark, empty road, the headlights cutting through the fog. Her breath is shallow, her eyes wide with panic, as if something is chasing her, something she can't outrun. She swerves the car toward the beach, tires screeching, and her mind racing. The cold ocean air hits her face as she steps out of the car, her trembling hands fumbling for her phone. She dials her father's number, voice cracking as she apologizes for the harsh words, for the distance between them. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispers, the words barely escaping her lips. Her heart pounds, but the call is cut short, a sense of dread gnawing at her. But when the sun rises the next day, everything changes. The once peaceful beach is now stained with terror. Her lifeless body is found, her leg twisted unnaturally beneath her, the bone sticking out like a grotesque reminder of the horror she endured. A brutal end, far too soon, and the questions, so many questions, linger in the cold morning air. The film then cuts to Jay, sitting nervously next to Hugh at the movie theater. They're on a date, but the air between them feels off. From the awkward silence to his strange comments, it's clear something's not quite right. They're waiting in line, and Hugh casually mentions how envious he is of young children, how they live without a care in the world, with innocence and freedom that he's lost somewhere along the way. Jay laughs uneasily, unsure how to respond. But when they finally take their seats, the tension only grows. Hugh's eyes flicker across the room, narrowing as he spots a young woman standing at the entrance. He nudges Jay, pointing her out. Jay looks, but the woman's not there. She sees nothing, only the growing discomfort in Hugh's face. Suddenly, Hugh's expression shifts, his skin pales, and his breath quickens. "We need to leave," he demands, voice trembling with fear. Jay doesn't understand, but Hugh's panic is real. He pulls at her arm, and the dark theater, filled with strangers, suddenly feels suffocating. On their next date, Jay and Hugh share an intimate moment in his car, but the scene quickly shifts. From the quiet tension between them to the sudden dark twist, everything turns cold and terrifying. As they kiss, Hugh pulls something from his pocket, pressing a cloth over Jay's face. Her world goes black. When Jay finally wakes up, she feels the sharp bite of panic. She's tied up, strapped into a wheelchair. Her heart races as Hugh stands before her, eyes cold, his voice strangely calm. "When we had sex," he says, his words echoing in her mind, "I passed it on to you. The curse." Jay's confusion only deepens as he explains. The curse isn't just a feeling, it's an entity. From that moment on, it will follow her, taking the form of anyone she knows, but only she can see it. Hugh's face darkens as he tells her that the entity moves at a slow, relentless pace, always walking toward her. If it catches her, it will kill her, and then it will go after Hugh. So the cycle continues, as each victim is forced to pass the curse on. The horror has just begun. Hugh's voice is cold, distant as he explains the twisted truth. From the moment he caught it, he's been running, unable to escape what's hunting him. He tells Jay that he got the curse from a girl he barely knew, a one-night stand that turned into a nightmare. "But why me?" Jay asks, her voice shaky with disbelief. Hugh's eyes darken, guilt and fear mixed in his gaze. "It won't stop following me," he says, his hands trembling. "It'll stalk me, haunt me, until I pass it on to someone else." So, that's why he slept with her, because he had no other choice. The weight of his confession hits Jay like a ton of bricks. The nightmare she's now trapped in isn't just her own, it's his too. In that moment, Hugh's eyes go wide with terror. From the corner of his vision, he spots her, naked, moving slowly toward them, her face blank and unnerving. Jay follows his gaze, but she sees nothing. Fear floods Hugh's veins, and without a word, he grabs her hand, and they run. The night feels colder as they race to the car, the world spinning around them. He drives Jay home, his knuckles white on the wheel, his mind racing with dread. He stops in front of her house but doesn't meet her eyes. "Stay inside," he says, voice cracking. He speeds off into the dark, leaving her behind. But as the night deepens, the police are closing in on him. They've got his face, his name, his past, but he's gone, vanished into the shadows. The curse follows him, relentless, as he disappears from their grasp. Jay watches from the window, unsure whether she's just escaped or if this is only the beginning of something much worse. While at school, Jay's heart skips a beat when she spots an old woman in a hospital gown slowly walking toward her. From the way the woman's frail body shuffles to the cold, empty look in her eyes, Jay knows something isn't right. The eerie thing? No one else seems to see her. Students pass by as if she's invisible, like she's nothing but a ghost lingering in the air. Jay's pulse races, but she tries to stay calm, keeping her eyes fixed on the woman as she edges closer. But then, her friend Paul, who's been secretly in love with her for a while, notices the fear in her eyes. He steps closer, his voice gentle, asking what's wrong. Jay tells him everything, and without hesitation, Paul, along with her sister Kelly, agrees to help. They're in this together now. No matter how impossible it seems, they won't leave Jay to face it alone. That night, Jay, Paul, Kelly, and their friend Yara all gather at Jay's house, agreeing to stay together, hoping the presence of others will somehow keep the terror at bay. From the safety of being surrounded by friends, to the strange unease in the air, it's hard to shake the feeling that something is coming. As the hours stretch on, The house grows eerily quiet, but then, in the dead of night, a noise breaks the silence. Paul jumps up, heart pounding, and heads toward the kitchen. He finds a smashed window, the glass shards glittering in the dim light. He looks around, scanning the darkness, but there's no one there, just the faint rustle of wind and the lingering feeling of being watched. So he turns back, only to find Jay's eyes locked on something outside. From the corner of the room, she sees it, a woman, almost naked, her eyes dark and hollow, moving toward her with an unnatural calm. Jay's blood runs cold. The nightmare is far from over. Jay bolts toward the others, her breath coming in frantic gasps. From the terror pulsing through her veins to the desperation in her voice, she tries to warn them. There's someone coming. She bursts into the room, her eyes wild, but when she looks at them, they all just stare back, confused. None of them can see what she's seeing. It's like she's the only one caught in the nightmare. But before she can say anything more, the air grows thick, and a tall man steps into the room. His eyes are dark, empty, like the void itself. From his shadow looming in the doorway to the icy chill that follows him, Jay knows that whatever he is, it's not human. Fear seizes her. Without thinking, she spins on her heels and runs out of the house, the door slamming behind her, the terrifying presence still lingering in her mind. Jay runs, her feet pounding against the cold ground as she makes her way to a nearby playground. From the rush of fear in her chest to the desperate need for escape, she doesn't stop until she's far from the house. One by one, her friends catch up to her, breathless but determined to stay by her side. As they try to gather their bearings, a neighbor named Greg appears out of nowhere. His offer to help feels like a lifeline. He'll give them a ride, anything to get out of this nightmare. So, together, they pile into his car, with only one thing on their minds: confronting Hugh. They track him down, figuring out his real address. When they find him, he doesn't flinch. He sticks to his story, insisting on the twisted truth. From the coldness in his eyes to the chilling words that follow, he tells Jay she must sleep with someone else to pass on the curse. There's no other way, no escape, just one horrifying choice. The group heads back to Greg's house, exhausted but with no time to rest. From the fear gnawing at her insides to the sudden clarity in her mind, Jay realizes something. She needs to learn how to use a gun. The feeling that she can't keep running forever pushes her into action. She knows what she has to do if she's going to survive. Later, the group sits by the water, trying to gather their thoughts. But the peace is shattered when the entity strikes. From the calm of the evening to the horror that unfolds in front of her, Jay watches in disbelief as the entity takes on Yara's form, its eyes dark and unblinking. It moves toward her, its presence suffocating. Panic grips Jay as the entity attacks. She doesn't think, just reacts, running. But the terror doesn't end. The entity shifts, now taking the shape of the tall, old man, then Paul. Jay's heart races, and she fires the gun. From the sharp crack of the shot to the disbelief in her chest, she watches as the creature doesn't fall, not even close. The gunshot does nothing. Frantic, Jay bolts for a car, slamming the door behind her and speeding away. But the road is unforgiving. She crashes, the car tumbling into a cornfield, leaving her breathless and trapped in the suffocating darkness. Jay wakes up in a sterile hospital room, the sting of her broken arm the first thing she feels. From the sharp ache in her body to the deep exhaustion weighing on her, she knows things can never go back to normal. The walls feel suffocating as the hospital noises fade into the background, and something inside her shifts. She knows what she has to do. Before she's even released, Jay makes a decision. From the heavy burden of the curse on her shoulders to the desperate need for it to end, she chooses to pass it on, hoping that Greg might be her way out. In a moment of resolve, she sleeps with him in her hospital bed, praying that by doing so, she'll free herself from the nightmare. But as the days unfold, Paul's heart shatters. From the hope in his eyes to the crushing betrayal when he finds out Jay was with Greg, he feels like the last bit of trust he had in her slips away. It's a choice Jay had to make, but it comes at a cost, one that no one can come back from. Jay sits by the window at home, staring out into the quiet street. From the calm of the night to the unsettling sight of Greg walking toward his house, something doesn't feel right. Her heart pounds as he reaches his window, breaks it, and slips inside. A cold realization creeps up her spine. It's not Greg. With a burst of panic, Jay runs over to the house, her feet pounding the ground. She peeks inside, and her blood runs cold as she sees it. From the familiar face of Greg to the horrifying transformation, the entity has taken on the appearance of Greg's mom. The chill in the air deepens as Jay knows there's no time to waste. She hurries to warn Greg, but it's too late. From the quiet hum of the phone to the sudden horrific attack, the entity leaps on Greg, sinking its claws deep into him. He struggles, but it's no use. He's dead within seconds. The curse has returned to Jay, heavier than ever. Terrified, Jay doesn't think. She runs, fleeing into the woods, her breath coming in panicked gasps. The darkness closes in around her, and she knows there's no escaping what's coming for her next. Jay wakes up to the sound of waves crashing nearby, her body aching from the cold night spent in the woods. From the disorienting haze of sleep to the realization that she's alone, she spots 3 young men on a boat out in the distance. The sun is rising, but there's no warmth to it for her, just the chill of desperation. In a daze, Jay undresses, the cold water lapping at her feet as she walks into the ocean. From the salty breeze on her skin to the growing sense of dread, she knows what she has to do. She hopes, prays, that by sleeping with one of these men, she can pass on the curse and buy herself more time, though she's not sure if it will work. She feels the weight of the curse pressing against her chest, and she knows it's only a matter of time before it catches up to her. Back at home, Paul sits close to Jay, his gaze lingering on her with a sense of longing. From the warmth of his presence to the awkward silence between them, Paul wants more. But Jay recoils. She can't let him get too close, not with the curse still hanging over her. If she lets him in, he'll be next, and she can't let that happen. Suddenly, her eyes flick to the roof, and there it is. From the normalcy of the moment to the sudden chilling realization, Jay spots IT, posing as a naked man, watching her with cold, empty eyes. Her heart races as fear grips her, but she knows she can't let it take her again. Paul, seeing her distress, comes up with a plan, one that could end it all, but not without a risk. From hope to desperation, he promises to kill It, to save them both. But Jay knows better than anyone that no plan comes without consequences. The group, desperate for a plan, heads to an old, deserted swimming pool, hoping to lure It into the water and electrocute it. From the quiet stillness of the place to the tense anticipation hanging in the air, Jay is chosen as the bait, stepping into the pool with a nervous breath. Her eyes scan the shadows, waiting for the entity to appear, and then, there it is. From the water's cold embrace to the nightmare that unfolds, It has taken on the form of her father, a twisted mockery of everything she fears. Her heart races, but she tries to hold it together. But It isn't fooled. As soon as it sees the trap, it starts tossing electrical devices into the water, sparking violent jolts that threaten to fry Jay. From the electric crackle in the air to the panic rising in her chest, Jay realizes she's just a pawn in a much darker game. The others, unable to see It, fire blindly into the chaos. Amid the chaos and confusion, Paul's shot goes wrong, and Yara screams in pain. But then, from the darkest depths of desperation to the final moment of truth, Paul shoots It in the head. The water stills, and for a moment, there's only silence. The entity is dead, or so they think. After they head home, Paul and Jay finally give in to their feelings, and the weight of the curse, for a brief moment, seems to fade away. From the intensity of their connection to the hollow relief that follows, Jay feels a fleeting sense of normalcy, until the reality sets in. But Paul's thoughts are elsewhere. He drives alone to a forgotten part of Detroit, a rundown street lit by flickering streetlights, where the shadows seem to swallow the air. From the quiet hum of the engine to the chilling realization in the pit of her stomach, Jay knows where he's headed. Paul pulls up to the corner, where women stand on the street, their faces masked by cold, empty expressions. From the muffled sounds of the city to the grim, haunting silence that follows, it becomes clear. Paul intends to pass the curse on, and he'll do whatever it takes. The thought settles like a weight between them, making the night feel darker than before. Sometime later, Jay and Paul walk down the quiet street, hand in hand, their footsteps the only sound breaking the silence of the night. From the comfort of their closeness to the unease creeping over Jay, something doesn't feel right. But when she glances over her shoulder, her heart drops. Someone is following them, keeping a steady, unnerving distance. From the shadowy figure trailing them, to the chill in the air that suddenly feels much colder, Jay knows they're not alone. So, which awesome movie should we recap next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below and let's make it happen. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button so you never miss out on our movie recaps. We've got plenty more coming your way. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Produced by Warner Movie Recaps.